Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I am joined by Patrick Brown and Ryan Callahan here on Monday, August 4th, the morning of Monday, August 4th, as Tennessee has its second off day of fall camp. There's no practice today. There's no availability, which means it is kind of an off day for us as well. Maybe not an off day, but at least not as busy day for us, ripping and running and getting over to campus. Tennessee has wrapped up week one of fall camp, and we're going to share some of our takeaways from week one and our thoughts on a couple of different things. And then, of course, turn the page and start looking ahead to week two, which is a very, very important week, as I think the quarterback competition will really start to heat up. You've got your first scrimmage in Neyland Stadium this Saturday morning. It's a big, big week for Tennessee football, and there's plenty to discuss. Patrick, Ryan, hope y'all are doing well. Safe to say, Ryan, week one of fall camp went okay, went smoothly for us.
Yeah, no major hiccups on this end, but no,
You feeling good after week one?
Yeah, about me or the team?
You, how are you feeling? That's what we
I'm
want.
okay. Yeah, doing all right. I think, it was an okay first week for Tennessee, I'd say, right? I mean, they got Boo Carter back out there, and we'll get into that in a minute, but so some things to worry about too. So a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say, so far. Some guys that ideally would be out there right now who are not, but yeah, it's been good to get back out there and actually have some football to talk about, even though we're seeing even less than previous years. It feels like they're showing so little in the quarterback competition. I mean, we're seeing short to intermediate routes and routes on air and nothing beyond that, or we haven't seen anything of 11 on 11 even the first day. So, got to make of it what we can, but we've gotten very brief glimpses.
And Patrick, I think Josh Heupel's gotten smarter. Josh Heupel is smart, has always been smart. I don't mean to insinuate otherwise, but he's gotten even smarter or become more of a chess player, because he's actually given us this first week more practice time to watch. Like we've seen more minutes of practice, but within those minutes, to Ryan's point, I don't think that we haven't really seen anything. I think he has strategically made sure that they save the good stuff for when we are not there. So technically he's giving us more time, but he's not giving us any of the good stuff while we are there.
Yeah, no team periods. I think I don't know if it was the last podcast or the one we did right before camp started, but I was like, usually the first 2 days we get this, and that. No, we didn't get that at all. I mean, we got like 6 periods on the first day, but there were no team periods because they didn't have any team periods. They only did a couple of team periods toward the end of their second practice. So that will have ramped up more over the last couple of over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. But and that's why I think it's pretty early for a lot of these competitions. But yeah, we get to see a lot of guys run around, and then we'll find out how good they are at football here in a few weeks.
And Ryan, you mentioned Boo Carter. We'll lead off there because Boo has been our leadoff hitter for several podcasts now, and he will continue to hit in the leadoff spot. I guess for at least this podcast, we'll see if he hits leadoff the next podcast we record as well. But wanted to bring him back up just to give a very brief update. Of course, we've been putting this in our post-practice observations, all 4 practices that we have had so far, which again, those practice observations, especially when Patrick was doing them. Of course, Patrick had a family obligation Sunday, so wasn't able to make it over to practice, and I pinch hit for him. And Patrick, very strategically, just like Mr. Heupel, made sure that I was in charge of doing the observations on when they gave us absolutely nothing to observe in practice. We got stretches, we got the warm-up drills that we get to see every single practice, and then we got 4 minutes of one period before we got kicked out. So, Patrick, I appreciate that after you were given like 20 minutes of football to watch the days prior.
See a little, see a lot, as Butch Jones would say, Ben.
No, we saw a little, and I saw a lot. Both. See a little, see a little. Back to back times 2. See a little squared is what me and Ryan were dealing with on Sunday. So my observations on Sunday was not 1,100 words, but Patrick's the first 3 days were 1,100 words of phenomenal stuff. Patrick's not rushing through his observations to get it posted just for the sake of posting and getting it on social media. He's not taking practice lightly and acting like that there's not enough to see, because as Patrick said, that if you pay close enough attention and aren't there just to be there, then you can see a lot. And Patrick puts a lot of effort and thought into those observations. And again, isn't just doing it just for the sake of rushing through it and getting it on social media just for the sake of content. It's phenomenal content, and without a doubt the price of admission to our site at GoVols247.com right now. So I encourage you to go back and check those out if you have missed them. But a long-winded way of saying, we have been including the Boo Carter updates in those observations, and he hasn't been out practicing with the team, at least while we are there. He's been off to the side. He is gradually, speaking of Butch Jones, got his helmet back. It's almost like the black stripe days with Boo Carter. He got his black stripe taken off, or in this case, he got his helmet back on Saturday and Sunday, but was continuing to work off to the side. So that's made the rounds on social media and whatnot. But why I wanted to bring Boo up, Ryan, is because it did sound like he addressed the team last week after he was absent quite a bit the last couple of months of the offseason. And I just kind of think now that he has addressed the team and apologized, it's just kind of wait and see mode. And I very much have the personality of, I appreciate you apologizing. And I'm not talking to Boo when I say this. This is just with anything in life. If somebody has to apologize to me for whatever, I'm very much of the mind of, I appreciate you apologizing, but I need you to go prove that you've changed. I need to see that you truly, that to me is how you truly show that you are sorry for something, is by your actions following up whatever mistake it is. And I feel like a lot of his teammates are kind of in wait and see mode. The apology was a great step, but okay, now what do you do with it these next couple of weeks as we build up to the season?
Yeah, no question. That's where his teammates, his coaches are all eager to see what he does next. You know, can he continue to kind of humble himself, work his way back over the next, couple weeks, few weeks, however long this is going to drag out? That's the thing we don't know. Josh Heupel's not laid out what the road back for Boot Carter really looks like, and we don't know. Even if he's back and still available with the team, and he's getting back on the field, is he available to earn his starting job back, and when? What does that all look like? We still don't know. So Boo, I think, still may have to show some patience in this. I don't think this is going to be just a 1 week, and then it's over kind of process. It seems like something that's going to be, to your point, Ben, kind of proving your actions over time, and not just, doing a few chores, so to speak, for a few days, and then it's all behind you. So this will be interesting to see. This has been the question, I think, internally a lot of people have had, is can he really accept what all it's going to mean to stay with the team and to fight his way back into that position? Because it was made clear to me that this was not going to be just a small punishment there, that he was going to have to do several things to earn his way back. And if that's the case, this probably isn't going to be over anytime soon.
He's the lead off of practice observations, to your point, Ben, because he's like the first thing you look for every day. First of all, to see that he's there. Frankly, I mean, it could be any day where you don't see him warming, going through stretch with the DBs. That's just kind of the nature of him as a player in this situation. To Ryan's point, that he's got hoops to jump through, maybe is the way to put it, but it's not just a couple. And I think he's really got to earn the respect back of his teammates, probably first and foremost. If he's going to be back in the good graces of this program and playing for Tennessee this season. So I know a lot was, he got a helmet back. He's wearing shoulder pads. I guess it's baby steps, but he has done some hospital visits, one or two, I think, as well. That's probably part of it too. Just more things that maybe he missed those things during in July. Those are things that he's got to handle, and he's got to show that he's willing to, sort of as Ryan alluded to, do some of the things that are required to get back in the graces. And I mean, Heupel kind of, before camp started, said it was going to be sort of almost a day by day, like each day we'll take it and then we'll go on from there. It's kind of almost been that way. So we'll see if he shows up at practice on Tuesday and the next day and see if he expands his role or gets back out there in position drills, but might not be anytime soon.
Patrick, I think this first week, the biggest storyline was the heat on the passing game. The passing game is under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people breathing down the neck of Kelsey Pope, of I'd say Joey Halsley and Josh Heupel. People mention Kelsey Pope first and foremost because he's the receivers coach, and it hasn't necessarily gone well the past 2 years. But let's not forget that Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley play a big role in the passing game as well, obviously, along with others. So just that entire group, the passing game overall, I feel like was the biggest storyline of week one, because if we're being honest, it was not a good first week, at least from what we could tell while we were out there. And those first couple of practices, especially 1 and 2, they were not doing a lot of team periods. So what we saw is kind of what the practice entailed as well. So with the understanding that the quarterback competition doesn't really heat up in the first 4 practices or so, and now as we get into week 2 and full pads are coming on, scrimmage number 1 is coming up, that's when the quarterback competition will really start to heat up this week. With that understanding that it hasn't yet, I think the passing game overall, maybe aside from the tight ends, there's a lot of reason for optimism there. But the receivers and the quarterbacks, I felt like that was them catching all the heat that they have kind of from the outside. The outside noise is, to me, been the biggest headline of week 1 of fall camp.
Yeah, and maybe people are overreacting to 3 periods of routes on air. I mean, you expect those things to be perfect, but as Josh Heupel would say, this game is not perfect, right? I mean, quarterbacks miss throws, quarterbacks throw interceptions. I'm sure everyone has seen the interception heard around the world that Tennessee's put on social media, and who do they blur out and all that. I don't have a strong enough opinion to get into all that, but that was a good play by Colton Hood, but an underthrown pass there. So by Jake Merklinger, I believe. So yeah, I mean, you'd expect to be 100% when you're throwing against air, but maybe that's part of this time of year, right? I mean, you've got some young quarterbacks, a new quarterback in Joey Aguilar, you got some young receivers, so naturally, when that's the case, there's going to be some inconsistency. So I think you've seen that a little bit. You'd like to see them sort of continue to improve that rhythm and timing and those periods, and also when they get into team periods and 7-on-7 stuff. So we'll have to see how much we hear about what's going on when we're not there. I think that's going to be a bigger tell of what this team and this offense looks like, more than the little that we see. I still have my doubts about these receivers, and I don't know that I would have, my mind would have been changed anyway through 4 practices. It's really not much to do with Chris Browse not being out there yet. He should be back this week from what we've heard. Mike Matthews was not out there on Sunday. Sounds like that's a day-to-day thing. And really, I think I texted this to you guys on Sunday, but that's like 5 of the top 13 guys in my most important players ranking were not practicing. When you throw in those 2, Jamal McCoy, Boo Carter, Joshua Joseph is dealing with something that doesn't sound like a big deal, but and then even Miles Kitselman's limited, so he's not doing everything, but he's out there running around, catching passes, leading, and stuff like that. But back to the receivers, it's just going to be, we're just going to have to let it play out, right? I know Ryan's probably a little higher on these receivers than I am, but it's just, the proof's ultimately going to be, can they go out there and make plays on Saturday? So as you get more team periods in practice, Ben, like you said, you want to see and hear more guys making plays, right? That would be positive steps for the receivers too, and the quarterbacks. And that's not to say the quarterback situation shouldn't be, should be looked at as fine. I just think that Josh Heupel's probably earned the benefit of the doubt that he can get a quarterback or put a quarterback in position to be productive and lead an offense to some production. So we'll have to see. But again, we just got to let it play out. There's a decent amount of camp left to go. And I think if Tennessee needs, what you would like to hear is some positive steps being taken this week, that some guys are making plays in team periods, and maybe they'll come back and show some of those on social media and get everybody fired back up again.
Well, then they'll just be upset with the defensive backs.
Right. Yeah. That's how it goes in camp.
We still don't have a safety.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this has not been an ideal start to camp for Tennessee at wide receiver, just from the standpoint of Chris Brazel's not been out there every day, and Mike Matthews now has missed some time. So if you were drawing up an ideal start to camp for a position group that obviously needs to have a good camp, that's not what it would look like. And then, the fact that you've had some drops mixed in there, and sure, it's not all been the starters or the guys that are going to play the most this season, but it's been some of those guys too, and that's not ideal. But at the same time, I think all that's just a product of everyone, parsing over the little bit we've been given, which is routes on air at the start of practice. And in the grand scheme of things, that's not football. That's not really a great look at what this offense is going to look like. It's not showing whether they can get separation. It's not showing whether they can go up and make a play in tight coverage. It's not showing any of those things. But I get the thought process there, which is if they're not catching balls and routes on air, how are they going to make those other plays? It's not always that simple. Football is a little more complicated than that. And human nature, you're going to drop the easy pass sometimes and make the good play when the lights come on. And that's just how it is. We've seen how many other guys over the years that just stink in routes on air or aren't as good in routes on air. And then when you put them in 11 on 11 or more to the point, get them out there on game days, they're a totally different player. So I don't worry too much about that kind of stuff. Sure, it would be better if they were crisp in those settings. But I don't think, missing a few throws here and there means Joey Aguilar or Jake Merklinger is not a good quarterback. And I don't think a few drops means the receivers are just up the creek in terms of production this year. So we'll see. And you guys kind of alluded to this. We'll see what it looks like in the first scrimmage Saturday. We'll see what we hear about team periods as they get more into camp. But yeah, it's not been just an ideal start to camp, at least from the perspective of guys missing time, because you need every rep you can get with those quarterbacks and receivers to get some continuity, get some chemistry going, and to just improve, because you got so many young players out there who haven't done it. Chris Brazzell really being the only experienced guy that you're going to be playing this season at wide receiver.
Yeah, if you take Brazzell and Matthews off the practice field, which was the case on Sunday, how many catches do the rest of the receivers, how many career catches combined do the rest of the receivers have? I mean,
yeah, whatever
zero?
Braylon Staley had. No,
Did Staley make a catch last year?
He had 2 or 3, I think. It was not many.
So, I mean, that Patrick says 3. Did you hold up
2
3?
We're in the playoff game.
Did you hold up 3 or 4? Your window shot was all right. 3. Thank you. And 2 of them were in the playoff game.
Yeah, because Nimrod was in the portal. I heard he's doing some great things for the Ben McKee EA College Football 26 Dynasty. Nimrod was in the portal and Squirrel went out of the game in the second quarter. So Staley went from playing 30-something snaps the whole season to playing like 50 in the playoff game.
Right, and those are the only 2 catches Sunday's group of receivers that were practicing have made in their career, correct? Am I forgetting a receiver who has made a catch?
Well, there might have been and again, it's like, are they still walk-ons? I'm still in the fuzz about what to.
I'm calling them reserves. The walk-ons are now. I'm calling what were walk-ons. They're reserves to me now, because they're scholarship players. You can't call them walk-ons.
Right. Well, I mean, post-house, there's no more things as scholarships, right? There's no such things as walk-ons. Tommy Winton caught a bunch of passes at ETSU 2 years ago. So, I mean,
Tommy Winton looked pretty solid.
That doesn't count, right? I mean,
that counts. I mean, that's college football. I guess FCS, FBS. How many career FBS catches do they have? And then you wouldn't be able to include Tommy unless he was able to make a catch in one of those bye games that ETSU plays in. And hey, as a side note, Tommy Winton's looked pretty good. By my expectations going into camp. I mean, I'm not expecting him to carve out a role, but I don't know, Ryan, what are your thoughts on, do you think he could carve out a role? I mean, I guess technically I need to consider it more than maybe I initially did, given just the lack of bodies they have.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect him to play, but if they got in a pinch and really needed him, he is a guy. I mean, that's what I was going to point out. Tennessee offered him in high school, recruited him a little bit before he went to ETSU. So, clearly that interest faded a little bit toward the end, but yeah, they looked at him for a while. So he's not a bad athlete, good player. I think he could help them in a pinch. Now, do they want to see that? Probably not, but I think that's a situation where you could get some snaps out of him if needed. That's a Dayton Sneed level player where I think he was a guy before he left. You could have probably thrown out there in a pinch and he could have played. So you've got some of those guys on this roster, and that's a good thing to have when you're short on scholarship bodies. But I was going to point out too, for all the negatives, and there have been some, obviously with the drop passes and guys missing time, I have heard some good things about Travis Smith and Rodarius Jackson. Those freshmen have shown up and continue to show up since spring practice in some situations. So I think they're still making plays. That's not to say other guys aren't too. Those are just two that I've had people single out that have been at practice and say, hey, he's showing up. He's making some plays and has some potential to help. So I think they still have some talent there. It's just, again, can those guys do it when the lights come on and show that they can play at this level? And we don't have any track record for most of these guys to really know.
See, that's my confusion here, is that like we act like they're running out 7 guys out there. They've got 16 wide receivers on the roster. So they got a lot of numbers, but again, you just break it down. 9 of those guys were, the artist formerly known as a walk-on, I guess what we'll call it. And then 4 of those guys have never played in a college game when you look at the 3 freshmen and Amari Jefferson. So that's just what they're looking at. That's just sort of what they're dealing with. And Tennessee's made its bed with this composition of this position group, and now they've got to go lie in it, and we'll see how it goes. But again, you want to hear, kind of to Ryan's point there about the 2 freshmen, you want to hear in the coming days and in the scrimmage, hey, this guy made some big plays. That's what Tennessee needs for this group to, I think, internally have people feeling better about that position, and then also I think to get everybody off the ledge.
To put a bow on the conversation, it was week 1. There's always going to be drops week 1, a little bit sloppier than you would like week 1. Now, I think it was even sloppier than the usual slop fest that can be expected. So to put a bow on that conversation, on a scale of 1 to 10, after 4 practices, we understand the context of it when we're answering this. Exiting week 1 of fall camp, week 1, 4 practices of fall camp, scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about Tennessee's passing game?
Ryan's waiting on me to answer. I would go 7.
I was going to say 6. I worried, but I think there are more positives there than people are seeing and just the routes on air. So I'll say 6. There's still legitimate reasons to worry, but it's not full panic mode at this point.
It's not full panic mode, but I am really worried. I'm at a 7 or an 8. And that also, I was not very high on the receivers going into fall camp to begin with. And again, I like the talent in the room. I just think the talent is a year or so away. I don't know that it's ready to have the impact Tennessee needs this upcoming season. I really like them as prospects. I don't think that they're ready just yet. So we will continue to monitor that situation. I guess if we're going to spend so much time talking about the receivers, what have been your week 1 takeaways at the quarterback position? Again, we haven't gotten to see a lot. My brief thoughts are that Joey has the biggest arm, Jake a bit more accurate, and George is just kind of back there playing loosey-goosey and just – I mean, I thought on Sunday, I thought George consistently threw the best football. Now, again, with that being said, we saw 3 to 4 minutes of them throwing the football against air, and they did not run a route longer than 12 yards. I mean, they were in that 5 to 15-yard range. So when I say George was consistently throwing the best football, please keep that context in mind. But, hey, Joey had too much zip on one throw. He was behind on another guy. So although I encourage you to tread lightly with overreacting to that comment, I mean, Joey Aguilar, the guy who has played more college football than George, was not able to make the same throws that George throws. So it's always hard to, like, how much should we react to what we see? Because we're only given so little to see, and that's not our fault. That's Tennessee's fault, because they're the ones making the decision to show us as little as they do, which opens up Pandora's box to sit on here and for us to potentially overreact like crazy, or fans to overreact like crazy on social media or other media members. Because I know Tennessee didn't like a particular video that made its way to Twitter from Saturday's Routes on Air session, and because that video made it to Twitter, and in my opinion, sparked the reaction from the fans, which to me is, in my opinion, why they decided to make us not film it. We were not allowed to film Routes on Air on Sunday, in my opinion, because they didn't like the overreaction from the fans from the video they saw on Saturday. So it's Tennessee's own doing. And when you show us as little as they show us, you're going to get overreaction. So it's always hard to, how much should I react to something because we're seeing so very little. But I mean, I like on Sunday, I thought George threw the best football out of the short intermediate throws we saw for 3 minutes. What are your, again, a long-winded way to getting to y'all of asking just your week one takeaways from the quarterback position?
I don't think there's been too much separation yet that I've been able to hear. I still am not coming off my stance. I think it'll be Aguilar. I just think he offers more upside. I think he's just got a better arm than Jake Merklinger. Again, Merklinger will have some bad throws, and he underthrew the ball that everybody saw. I will say George, everybody's worried about it that they blur out the quarterback. They didn't blur out the quarterback when George dropped one over a defender, leaping full extension to I don't know. I think it was one of the former walk-on wide receivers, but dropped one in over a zone safety or something. They didn't blur him out. You could see that was him. So maybe they're not all out to get the quarterbacks blurred out on social media, or maybe it was because it was a good play. They wanted everyone to say, "Hey, look at that throw." But yeah, I think that like I said, it's still early. That's the question I get from friends, people I see at church and things like that is, how's the quarterbacks looking? I'm like, they've had 4 practices. They had 2 of them with minimal team periods. So I think it's going to be kind of moving week to something that I think Ben you alluded to earlier. This is, to put it in golf terms, this is going to be moving week for the quarterback competition. I think as you string more practices together, more full pads, shells practices where you're playing a little bit more actual football, I think that's when you want to see in those team periods who is commanding, who's running the show, who is making plays, and that's where I think if you're Tennessee, you hope to see some separation, right? That's Josh Heupel said before camp started that he would love to know tomorrow who his quarterback was, because once you know who that is, you can start doing some other things. But it's got to sort of play out, and so this is the week that I think it'll really play out going into the scrimmage on Saturday. That scrimmage can determine who's maybe getting a little bit more, how they divvy up the reps for the week after that, before the second scrimmage. So this is an important week, but I haven't seen or heard enough to think anything or to sort of change my stance that I think Aguilar will be the guy to open the season for Tennessee.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I take almost nothing from the Routes on Air personally. I just what goes into playing football has so little to do with that that it's not a fair representation of what's going to determine who wins a quarterback battle. So it's all about decision making, ball placement, when there's actually coverage, things like that you can't judge from Routes on Air. And it's just a totally different game when there's no pass protection, no pass rush, all that stuff. How do you manage the pressure? How do you manage lining up the offense? All those things. There's so much that goes into football, and Routes on Air tells us none of that. So I think, to your point, Ben, sure, Tennessee could alleviate some of the stress on the reaction to Routes on Air by showing more of practice. But I think people do have to understand that breaking down completion percentages of Routes on Air is not going to tell you who's going to win this job, nor should it ever. And putting out, so anybody making graphics based on who's accurate in a Routes on Air session is probably overreacting a little bit and making too much of this. It's going to come down to how guys play in team settings, and that's where Joey Aguilar's experience is more likely to show up. Having that advantage. And to your point about George McIntyre, I think he has probably the most arm talent among the 3 quarterbacks. He's going to look good in some of these sessions. There's a reason he was ranked for a while where he was. He still ended up being a 4-star, but he was a 5-star in the 24/7 Sports composite for a minute. So he's got some big time ability. And I think you're excited about his long-term potential. He's just never done it. He's got a lot to learn, and he's had to put on weight in year 1 as well. So he's still a guy you probably don't ideally want to play this year, but there's a reason he's looked good at times. There's a reason he looked good in the spring game. He's a talented quarterback. So, but that's why it doesn't just come down to raw talent. And that's, how many times have we seen it? Peyton Manning was not the most talented guy in terms of arm talent in the NFL. He did everything else right. He did everything well between the ears. And that's what so much of the game is about. So it's going to come down to who handles the pressure, who makes the adjustments, who makes the best decisions. And I think this offense is gonna help the passing game too with some of the adjustments they're making this year. Joey Halsley alluded to that this past week. So I think some of the hand-wringing over the passing game is justified because they weren't good last year, and you're thin there this year. You got a new quarterback. There's a lot to worry about, but I still think overall the results might be improved, and the routes on air session don't necessarily show the reasons for that.
Yeah, it seems like we might see the pistol broken out this year, and in terms of Joey Halsley saying, "Hey, what are we gonna do when teams are dropping 8 and playing soft coverage?" I think Tennessee believes that the pistol may be the answer. So we'll see how that continues to play out over the course of fall camp and as we get into the season. So I know that's not a fun conversation for fans to listen to about maybe being a little glass half empty on the passing game.
I've already had people speculate. I've already had people speculating that Tennessee's just going to run the ball and play to the defense this year based on this. I'm like, I don't think it's going to be that bad. I don't think they're going to feel like they're so restricted in the passing game that they're just going to throw 20 times a game and just run the ball constantly. I mean, there may be some games they have to do that, but I don't think that's going to be their game plan going into the season at all.
I don't think it's going to be their game plan, but I think that's what they're going to have to end up doing. That's my personal opinion. I think. Look, it's week 1. We'll see how things develop. Ryan and I, we have had some fun conversations during week 1 off camera. We have differing opinion on the passing games. He is higher on it than I am. I do think that this season is gonna have to be exactly what last year was. I think the defense is by far gonna have to be the strength of the team, which it will be. I think that you would agree that the defense is probably going to be better than the offense, but in order for them to win games this year, I think it's going to have to be a pretty similar style to last year, to where you win it on the running game and you win it on the back of the defense.
I'd be throwing it to 87-0, a little bit more. That's what I'd be doing.
And hey, to my credit, although I am the one that is more down on the passing game than Ryan, and probably more down than Patrick, although Patrick's in the middle of Ryan and I would say, if I were to speak for him. I did say early in the podcast, I do love this tight end room. I really do love this tight end room. I think it can be a big weapon for this team. And I've said numerous times that I think that they're going to have to take a lot of pressure off of the receivers to help this passing game potentially be one that is troublesome for opponents. I love Miles Kitselman. I think he's an NFL tight end. This is a money year for Ethan Davis. I'm expecting big things from him. And I think both of those freshmen are going to be able to help Jack Van Dorseleer and Desan Brame. So I am high on the tight end room. I will say that. I'm not completely down on all of the positions that are associated with the passing game. But I do think, at least to start the season, we'll see how the passing game develops, because they do have a lot of young guys. Hopefully, second half of the season looks better than the first half of the season after they take their lumps. But I do think that they're going to have to lean on the defense and lean on the running game. That is my opinion here at the start of fall camp. So I know that's not a fun conversation for fans to listen to, but we do have optimistic takes on coming out of week 1 of fall camp as well, and we're going to discuss those on the other side of this quick timeout. Welcome back into the GoVols247 Podcast. I'm Ben McKee, and I'm joined by Patrick Brown and Ryan Callahan on this Monday, August 4th edition of the pod. Before we jump back into our conversation and start to look ahead to week 2 of fall camp, I do need to encourage you to go leave us a review wherever you find your GoVols247 podcast. I know we ask that of you all the time, but it really does help us in a major way, which is why we continue to ask, and we certainly appreciate your efforts if you have done so or are going to do so. Also, these podcasts are now in video form as well, being posted to YouTube. A lot of people watched our recruiting podcast that Ryan and I recorded on Saturday, I think that was, and got good interaction on there. We certainly appreciate those who interacted and those who watched and those who are listening on the pod as well. But we are on YouTube. If you're somebody who prefers to watch instead of listen, we are on YouTube. And if you wouldn't mind going and at least subscribing to the site, we've got our podcasts that are now being posted. We've got player interviews, coach interviews, our no huddle that we filmed that shares our thoughts on the day of practice, game week, post game. All sorts of video is on our YouTube page, and that will continue to be the case as we get into basketball and baseball season as well. So if you wouldn't mind, at least, even if you don't want to watch, hey, go subscribe to our YouTube page. We would greatly appreciate that. And Ryan, of course, it's a great time to sign up for the site right now.
It is. We got 50% off an annual subscription to join right now. Lots of people taking advantage of that. We appreciate the new members and the longtime members, of course, sticking with us as well. But it is a fantastic time to join the site with that current offer, and also $1 for the first month if you just want to try it out on a monthly basis. But I would encourage you to take advantage of that annual subscription and get all the access throughout the season. Spring or winter transfer portal activity, all that stuff, all covered when you sign up for an annual subscription. So join that. And of course, after the promotional period ends, we don't talk about this as much as we used to, but one of the best bargains in the business, once you get past the promotional period, you get Paramount Plus thrown in for free down the road. So that's a tremendous offer as well. So multiple reasons to join in. But yeah, that sale is underway, and lots of people are already taking advantage of it.
Patrick, one thing I did want to briefly mention before we get into our other post-week one takeaways on the injury front, a little more concerning, I think, than the Chris Brazzell, Mike Matthews not practicing, because it does sound like Brazzell and Matthews are going to be back on the practice field this week. Matthews probably before Brazzell, if not at the same time, starting Tuesday. We'll just have to watch and monitor that situation. But a little more concerning in my mind is Joshua Josephs dealing with something that is a nagging injury. Again, it's not considered major or anything, but I don't know. I don't think you ever want to hear the word nagging associated with an injury. And again, it's minor right now. No need to freak out. But he has not been out there while we have been there the last 2 days on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, I think they're early enough in camp that if there's something bothering him, put him on the side, let him get it back to normal. I mean, it's easy to say. I'm kind of split on some of these like minor camp deals where guys are missing practice time, because it's like, well, you'd rather have, if you got a chance to try to get him healthier now, you got to take it. But at the same time, you just look at a year ago, Lance Hurd was missing a lot of time in camp. That impacted how he played during the season. Same thing goes with Mike Matthews. Maybe he would have been a bigger factor had he not missed so much of camp with the hamstring. So Joseph is probably not in sort of a similar situation as those guys were. That was a transfer coming in, who was also coming off something in the summer with Hurd, and a freshman in Matthews. So Joseph obviously has established himself. He knows at this point how to take care of his body, how to get his body right. But that's never, you don't want guys missing practice time if you can have it. I mean, football is, like we touched on earlier with the routes on air, like there's going to be bad throws and drop passes. There's also going to be injuries. So, and that's why you hear players and coaches so often talk about the treatment room and recovery and how important that is, especially this time of year when the grind can kick in. So we'll just have to see. I mean, again, if you can get him back in a week, or I'm just, the sooner you can get it back, the better. But if you can get him pretty close to health, full health going into the season, that's probably the best case scenario. But yeah, certainly a guy that you take him out of that equation, and that Leo group, which has sort of been working a little bit sounds like separately the last couple of days. It still looks like $1 million with some of those guys over there, like Caleb Herring, Jordan Ross, even Emmanuel Koye running around. He's always even looked the part, but that group gets really young. And so, that you take him out of that equation, and that's why, it gets that way. But yeah, we'll just have to see when he gets back, and hopefully for Tennessee, you're hoping that he again gets pretty close to full health and is ready to go for the start of the season. That's, I think, more important for a guy like him than maybe the two guys I referenced whose camp situations last year spilled over into the season and impacted how they played or how much they played.
And he's a veteran that he doesn't need to be practicing right now. He is somebody who can afford, just from a personal growth and being prepared. Like Joshua Josephs is going to be ready for game number 1 against Syracuse, even if he misses the practice number 3 and practice number 4. Whereas like Mike Matthews and Chris Brazzell, I know Brazzell's an older guy, but those guys, like, they need the reps. And not only do they need the reps, the passing game as a whole with the quarterbacks need the reps as well, where Josh Josephs, yeah, you want him to get the reps, but he doesn't need them. Jason Swain always talks about how his senior year, I believe it was his senior year, when he was dealing with the ankle injuries, he would not practice throughout the week. And Coach Fulmer told him that because he trusted that even though Swain wasn't practicing, he still knew that he was going to be ready to play on game day because he was a veteran, and those guys know how to still prepare for the game on Saturday, even if they aren't technically practicing. And I think Joseph's now, Ryan, wouldn't you say, has matured enough and has developed enough and is enough of a leader to where he can be trusted to have maintenance days and still be perfectly fine when game day rolls around?
I think that's probably fair. Now, I still think he's a guy that obviously needs to take a step this year. You know, he's looking to turn that production in the run game that made him so highly graded on PFF last year. He's looking to turn that into sacks this year, not, pressures into sacks, things like that. So there's still another step he's trying to take. So I wouldn't say he doesn't need the time, but to your point, I think he's much better equipped to miss some practices and have it not be an issue compared to a younger player. And there are a lot of younger players on this team. Adam Sparks from the News Sentinel laid it out last week that 49% of this roster is made up of true freshmen and redshirt freshmen. I mean, that's a pretty staggering number. So Josh Joseph is not one of those guys on this team. You don't need to worry about him from that standpoint. So yeah, he's in a much better situation to be able to miss some days and still be fine. So yeah, I think they'll be okay there. And kind of more to the point Patrick was making, people who were at practice over the weekend were kind of talking up Caleb Herring, Jordan Ross. I heard some good things about Emmanuel Okoye. That doesn't mean he's going to play in games necessarily, but you've got some talent at that position where even if he did have to miss some time, I think you have another option or two there that are pretty good. And it does sound like Jordan Ross has made some strides maybe since LaVorn Harbin kind of publicly challenged him this spring. We'll see how much of that is, shows up in terms of playing time, but I think he's definitely made some progress this offseason to where it's reasonable to think he could help this team. So that's a positive development there. And you do have some other players at that position to where I wouldn't worry quite as much about anything on defense for that matter. If you have somebody who has to miss some time, I think this defense has some depth, a little bit less so in the secondary, but everywhere in the front seven, I think you've got some other options where you'd probably be okay if you had to have somebody sit out.
Patrick, aside from the passing game, what else is on your mind? What's on the forefront of your mind exiting week one as we flip the calendar to week two? What were your other one or two big takeaways from week one of fall camp?
I'll focus on the offensive line. I think there's some intrigue there and some question marks there. What are they going to do at center? I think that remains, again, still early there too with William Satterwhite, Sam Pendleton. What direction do they go there? Ultimately, it's about getting the best five. And I put up some things this morning, some things I know, some things I think. And one of the things I know, I think, is Jesse Perry is well into this situation, well into this factor on the offensive line, to the point where if he's able to prove over the next week or two that he is one of Tennessee's best offensive linemen, it kind of flips the way you would go about that, right? Because theoretically, you would say you want to get the center position sorted out, and then that'll impact right guard, right? Because, if you feel good about Satterwhite, then you could put Sam Pendleton at right guard, and there you go. Now it's looking like Perry's got the inside track to being the starting right guard. Again, it's early. They've only had 2 practices. I don't even think they've gone in full pads yet. So that's where the offensive line is going to make its hay. But I think he is a factor there. And then we'll see how it plays out at center between Satterwhite and Pendleton. So I think that's something that I think we touched on it on our last podcast after the first day that Perry was out there with the first group again. I'm sure they're mixing and matching some with the offensive line, just sort of build depth, get, that kind of thing. And he might be doing some stuff at tackle too. So I think we talked to Glenn Ellaby after Tuesday's practice, so maybe we'll get a better gauge on where things are on the offensive line. But that's sort of the position now where if Perry can continue to build, maybe he's, like I said, you're trying to get the best 5, right? Whether you're trying to find a new center, you're ultimately trying to find the best 5. And so if Perry's one of your 5, then that may impact where you go at center. It's not as much as like, if Pendleton's not playing center, he's going to play right guard. If he doesn't play center, he might not be in the starting lineup. I guess that's a possibility that's on the table now, with Perry kind of making, doing some really good things this offseason in his second year of the program. So that's something that I think to monitor. Obviously, the center position is the big one, but the development of Perry, I think, is something else to keep an eye on over the next few days.
Yeah, and as we touched on, that was very much in line with what I've heard throughout the offseason about Jesse Perry. And Sham Umarov, I think, would be the other challenger there at right guard, right, Patrick? If someone else were to win that job, to your point, right now it looks like it might not be Sam Pendleton, it might be Sham. So we'll see where that competition goes. But
do you think that's because they're trying to get Pendleton over at center, or do you think that's because some guys have passed him up at right guard?
I think it's all just in an effort to get your best five on the field, and I think there's real confidence in the development of Jesse Perry and growing confidence in the progress that Sham has made, to where I think Tennessee might see that as its path to getting its best five on the field. But again, the one thing we don't know, say Satterwhite were to take the lead in the center position, would they shift Pendleton back to right guard then? We don't know. But I think it is telling that they've got Pendleton kind of focusing more on the center position at this point, and they're letting those other guys kind of compete at right guard. I heard some concern from some people about the offensive line in general. I'm a little more bullish on the offensive line. I think they're more likely to have a pretty good year overall if they can, get the center position figured out. But I think there's some concern at least about the depth of this offensive line. We'll see how the starting five looks. I think you're more talented at left tackle and right tackle this year because Lance Hurd is better. And I think David Sanders gives you an upgrade at right tackle on what you had last season. And then I think Wendell Moy is going to have a good year at left guard. So you've got three of those spots kind of locked in. Jesse Perry gives you some optimism at right guard. Sham could also give you some optimism there. So you've got to figure out center. That's a big piece. And when center's not working, everything else around it can kind of suffer a little bit from that position not being right. So we'll see if they can get that position right. But talked to some people who were at practice Saturday. There were some concerns about the offensive line. And maybe that's partly because they're practicing against this defensive line. That's the other thing you don't know is how much do they look bad because they're going against a really good defensive line. That's a real possibility. But bottom line, they're going to face some good defensive lines in the SEC. And if you're seeing some leaks in pass protection or some situations where they're not getting a lot of push in the run game, that's probably going to translate to other games too.
And I would almost think, Patrick, that what Ryan is saying about leaks across the offensive line is almost very similar to early drops in routes on air the first week, especially with that offensive line group, because there are new guys there. There's inexperienced guys in terms of game action working there at center, at right guard, and even Moy and Pendleton. They're in a new system. They're under a new coach. David Sanders, a freshman. Lance Hurd, he should not be having as many mental mistakes, and I don't know where the mental mistakes are coming from, but he would be kind of the guy that I would hope is not leading the charge in leaks across the offensive line. But yes, the offensive line is a big question mark because the offensive line has not been what it's needed to be the last 2 years. So there's pressure on Glenn Ellerby this season, much like there is Kelsey Pope. But like that, like I expect it is what I'm getting at. What Ryan just said about the offensive line, I kind of expect that in week one because of all the new players, and I kind of associate that to, routes on air and maybe some drops and bad throws early in camp as they're trying to find their rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is down to, Tennessee's defense should be ahead at this point of camp. They should probably, if they don't, I don't want to say dominate the two scrimmages, especially the first. This offense just seems to be working out so many kinks. They got so many guys competing for things. This defense, they've got that culture and philosophy set up. So they're just out there rolling. So, you got guys who are kind of figuring out, Sam Pendleton, for example, he's playing center, playing guard, he's trying to figure those things out. He's going against Bryson Eason, who's been in college football for 6 years. He's going against Jackson Moy, who started for two different he's going to be starting for his second Power 4 school. So it's kind of a few years ago, or maybe one of these recent seasons where like Tennessee had some guys shorthanded on the offensive line. So they had like freshman early enrollees going against like Elijah Simmons and Norman Lott, those guys. And you're like, it's just kind of not fair. And I'm not saying it's like that for Tennessee right now. But this defensive line is going to be a handful for a lot of teams, and it's certainly going to be a handful for an offensive line that, as we sort of touched on, has some moving pieces. They're trying to figure some things out. They got some guys that haven't played a bunch. So, I mean, yeah, they've gone up against these guys in practice for a couple of years now when you're looking at Umarov and maybe Perry. But, they haven't done it in game. They haven't seen that guy, that caliber of player too often. So I would think the defense should be ahead of the offense at this point. The defense has fewer questions. I think they are more of an identity and a philosophy and know what they're doing. They know what to expect. They've got better leadership on that side of the ball. I think so. I think you should hear that over the next few days and into the first scrimmage that Tennessee's defense is sort of having the upper hand. And I would expect that, like you said, Ben.
I'll be worried if they look like that against Syracuse. If I'm saying this, I have not done my research on Syracuse's defensive front. Maybe they are going to be much better than I anticipate, but just simply, and I hate when people do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. But just looking at the logo on the side of the helmets, Syracuse's defensive front should never push around a Tennessee offensive line. I mean, that an ACC, a mid-tier ACC program, if Tennessee wants to be the program that it wants to be, should not be pushing around Tennessee's offensive line. So my point is, if Tennessee's offensive line comes out and has significant issues against that Syracuse defensive front, then that's when I'll really start to worry. Unless it's coming out that Tennessee's defensive front is just winning all the time against Tennessee's offensive line, that would be concerning. But I am going to reserve judgment on that unit until I see them play against Syracuse because of what both of y'all talked about, and that's that they're potentially going up against a top 3, top 5 defensive line in the SEC every day in practice. And if you're a top 3, top 5 defensive line, you're one of the best in the SEC. You're one of the best in the country. So the hope is that will sharpen the offensive line. Iron sharpens iron, obviously, and the hope is that defensive front can really help this offensive line take a big step forward this month. To round out the podcast today, Ryan, wanted to touch on just overall thoughts or anything that stands out from our time talking to players this first week of camp. Well, we talked to several players over the first 4 days of camp. Who did you enjoy listening to? What comments stood out? What would you like to highlight from our time talking to players over the first week of fall camp?
Well, I did have a couple more observations I want to throw in before we get to that. There were some positives about this team to take away from the first few days. One of them for me is seeing the linebacker group out there all together, much like the tight ends. I think that group passes the eye test in a big way. I think there's a lot of talent at the linebacker position. I think that defensive line, now that you see all the freshmen out there, looks deeper than I probably even thought. I mean, I'm wondering how they're going to get a guy like Marion Dye on the field in their rotation. As many as they play, they still got some tough decisions to make on who's going to see the field and when. And that's a great problem to have, and shows how much talent they've accumulated across the defensive line. And even in the secondary, where they've taken some hits this offseason, they've still got 7 or 8 guys that feel like they can count on there. So just some good depth on defense, but especially in the front 7, and that tight end group, as you mentioned, Ben, looks the part physically for sure. I'm really interested in seeing if they can get those guys more involved in the passing game. As far as the freshmen, I think definitely or as far as the guys we talked with, some of the freshmen definitely, mostly have talked with freshmen at this point, and I will point to one of the veterans, Tyree Weathersby. I think is a guy not enough people are talking about, and talking with him, he seems like a confident guy, but also has the right approach every day. Just seems to be all just have a workman-like mentality, and just keeps doing what he needs to do, and I think could be primed for a pretty big year for a guy that's not being talked about. Jason Jenkins was obviously a guy who had maybe a similar impact to what you would hope you're going to get from a Tyree Weathersby this year, as that third guy in the strong side defensive end rotation who could have a big year. I think there's a lot of excitement about Tyree Weathersby. So I'm interested in seeing how much, if at all, Dominic Bailey slides inside, and does that give Weathersby more opportunities? Because I think that's a guy you need to get on the field. And yeah, I liked hearing from him the other day. And then also just talking to those freshman linebackers, Jaden Harmon, Jaden Perlotti for the first time the other day, hearing from those guys and just kind of being reminded these are guys that are probably not going to be in the rotation as true freshmen. That's quite a statement to the depth that Tennessee has there. Jordan Burns, another guy that impressed me in interviews, really looks the part physically and seems like he's taken some big strides. Him talking about the biggest difference from him last year to this year, he didn't really know what he was doing last year. He was rushing off the edge out of high school, coming out of high school, didn't really know what to do with the linebacker position, was very much figuring it out once he got healthy last year, and he's gotten up to speed and I think has a much better understanding of what he's doing. And I think he could be the fourth guy in that linebacker rotation if they do end up playing 4 again. So I think talking to those linebackers, that I was pretty impressed by that group overall, really, but just the young guys, especially, and Edwin Spillman's one that, hopefully people are talking about him. I don't hear that name a lot, but Edwin Spillman, buy your stock now while you still can. He's going to have a big year, and William Inge is justifiably excited about what they've seen from him so far.
I'm going to go to to David Sanders, obviously. Man, that kid, you hear Miles Kutzman say he carries himself like a fifth-year senior. Then you hear him talk and just the perspective he has. Really advanced for a freshman. Excuse me. But like just, the work he's put in this offseason to go from 270 when he got here, got his goal of 290 for spring camp or spring ball, and then he gets the preseason camp at 305. He was like, he lit up talking about how he was getting tossed around by Dominic Bailey back in the spring, and now he's able to sort of hold his own there. And that was the question mark going in was, or maybe that was some of our recruiting analysts were like, yeah, he's a little lean to make a big impact as a freshman. Well, he's put in the work this offseason and it's already started to show up. And so he's a guy that's got, big things in his future if he stays healthy and stays on the current path that he's on. And Tennessee should be really excited to have a guy like that. And you hear him talk, and then you hear, people talk about him sort of as the top dog in that freshman class. And then you see some of these other freshmen that are very mature, very grounded. They're not getting caught up in if they're going to be starting. They're just putting their head down and working. I think Ethan Utley put it as, hey, our freshman class, our mantra is to just shut up and work. And so that's a group that's got a really mature approach. There's a lot of talent in that group as well. And so if they can keep this class developing it together, it could be a pretty special class down the road. Now, keeping it together is always the hard part, right? You got to keep everybody happy and all that stuff. That's the challenge in this day and age. They have been, they were able to keep the 24 class together. That group is still all here. So if they're able to do that with this 25 class and get some of those guys on the field, maybe if more of those guys play earlier, they won't maybe, be so likely to look around and maybe look at their options. But that's got a lot of talent in this group. I think there's going to be some guys that are going to be able to get on the field. Ryan talked about the 2 linebackers. Those guys should be locks for special teams. Jaden Harmon, Jaden Perlotti, even Brendan Ains, some of those defensive backs that, maybe aren't going to be counted on a whole lot outside of maybe depth and playing late in some games. Those guys should be on special teams too. We'll see what Utley and Campbell, Campbell, I should say, can do on the defensive line, and if they can get anybody else in that rotation. And certainly there's going to be some freshmen contributing on offense as well. So Sanders is sort of the top dog, and he's sort of been the standout guy because he's going to play the most of probably the guys we've talked to. And he's really been measured and how he's gone about his first year. I like how he's leaned on Lance Hurd, who's been through the 5-star pressure cooker. He talked to Josiah Thompson, who started last season at South Carolina as a redshirt freshman. They knew each other from the recruiting aspect of it. So, he's kind of, he knows what he signed up for. He knows what the expectation is, and he's sort of taken the steps off the field and physically to put himself in position and to know what he's getting himself into. So expect big things from him. Won't be perfect every time. He will get probably pushed around by some guys and make some mistakes, give them some sacks, penalties, things of that nature. But I think he's going to be a pretty good one this year and beyond for Tennessee, and a guy that you can sort of build that offensive line around moving forward.
Tennessee is off today. On Monday, they'll be back on the practice field on Tuesday morning, back-to-back days. That seems to be the plan this fall camp for Tennessee, is practicing back-to-back days, and then an off day follows back-to-back practices. So Tennessee this week is off Monday and Thursday. They will practice for the 5th time on Tuesday, for the 6th time on Wednesday, for the 7th time on Friday, and then they will have their first scrimmage on Saturday. We will get to speak to Glenn Ellerby on Tuesday, Rodney Garner and LaVarn Harbin on Wednesday, and then Kelsey Pope on Friday. So it will be another busy week for us. In terms of the podcast, we will be back on Thursday to recap what we see on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then also look ahead to the first scrimmage on Saturday and discuss some of the different things that we would like to hear that comes out of Saturday's scrimmage. Do we know what day the full pads are going on this week? I imagine Tuesday or Wednesday.
I think Tuesday. It's usually practice 5, if I'm not mistaken. So I think
thought that was correct, but didn't know for sure.
I believe that's right. I haven't been told that, but that's my expectation right now.
Mine as well. Patrick, what can folks find with a trip over to GoVols247 right now?
Well, this morning I posted 3 things I think, or 3 things I know, 3 things I think, easy for me to say. Sort of a throwback. I did this a lot in my first year at 24/7. Haven't done as much since, but just sort of assessing where things are through 4 practices, some opinions, some stuff we've heard, and things of that nature. A lot of that we've talked about on this podcast, but go check that out. And then the coaches poll is coming out on Monday as well, so we'll see where Tennessee is ranked. And there will be some other stories from our player interviews over the last few days, sort of getting to know some of these new guys and some guys talking about their potential roles and what they're looking forward to doing this season.
Yep, Patrick has had several terrific stories on David Sanders Jr., Desan Brame, and several others. Of course, Ryan's great recruiting coverage from last week is still up there for those to go check out if you missed that. Ryan and I also recorded a recruiting podcast on Saturday. It was a big week 4 Tennessee recruiting last week. As much noise on the recruiting trail as there was on the football field last week for Tennessee, and we recorded a podcast on Saturday, so go back and check that out if you missed it. And of course, we'll have complete coverage of Tennessee fall camp as we move into week 2 along this week. For Patrick Brown and Ryan Callahan, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.